As a driven dentist, you see the world differently. Where some see scarcity, you see abundance. When others want to give up, you keep going. You're building an amazing life of significance. That means you can't rely on ordinary advice from ordinary advisors to get to your goals. You want advice that's going to help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love, the causes you care about, and make your dent in the universe. But the fact is, this advice remains hidden because relatively few professionals are well versed in them, and the extremely affluent don't care to let you know about them. Join us as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families. Welcome to Dental Wealth Nation. Here's your host, Tim McNealy.
Hey, welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Dental Wealth Nation show. And the world today, it is filled with strategies for success. We've got marketing strategies and business strategies and financial strategies. But today, I want to talk to you about the best strategy for success. And by the time we finish today, you're going to know why the best strategy for success is actually to bet on yourself. You're going to have new insights and challenges to think differently about what branding means. And you're going to feel encouraged to look inside yourself and really approach things from a heart-centric approach to your branding. And you're going to see how this changes everything. And when it comes to taking a heart-centric approach to your business and your life, I don't know anyone better than Shawn Zajas. And Shawn is a fellow podcast host and just an all-around great guy. Shawn, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Tim, it is awesome to be part of this. I just look up to your show. I love what you're doing. So it's great to be here with you.
Oh, man, it's like all our conversations are always so amazing. And I'm excited about this one, too, because I think so often we get pulled aside and we start looking for all these strategies of success. But I love what you're talking about. And talk to me a little bit about why we should bet on ourselves.
Well, I love what you just said, because you said so often we look around to look for strategies for success, which almost implies it's this outward search. Like we're looking for something outside of ourselves to figure out how we can be successful. When I think it starts with actually looking inward, it starts with actually who we are. It starts with the unique light that each and every one of us has. So when I think of abundance, the abundance mindset that most people quote has everything to do with money. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think the true appropriate way to look at abundance has to do with light. And that is that every single individual can shine, emit, and release their own unique light. Now, again, that might sound woo. I can make it incredibly practical in a moment. But that is true abundance. I could never shine your light, Tim. I could never try to be you. And basically, for practice owners and for dentists, when they get into practice and they start off, it makes sense that they start off by modeling. They have a hero. They have someone they look up to. They have a mentor. And it's like, okay, this is the way you do dentistry, especially when it comes to clinical. But at some point, if you want to get to the fullness of who you are, fulfillment, and distinct differentiation in your practice, you can't be modeling anymore. You actually have to look in the mirror and go, well, who am I? And what is the culture? What is the unique perspective? What's unique about who I am and how I can infuse that into my practice? And that's why I'm saying your best strategy for success today is to bet on yourself.
Wow. There's so much that you just said there. And it actually reminds me of the quote by Mark Twain. And Mark Twain says, the two most important dates in your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why. Right. And that's what I really hear coming through in your messaging is really figuring out our why and our purpose and how we are unique is really what can help drive success.
100%. I believe everyone has an authentic brilliance to them. And brilliance implies, again, the ability to shine brightly, unapologetically. But I couple that with authentic because it's not just, well, right now, what's trendy or what's current or what gets the reviews or the appeal of man is this certain thing. So I got to find out how to be that. I got to find out how to, through contrived effort and performance, how do I be just like that? And in reality, I feel like you're just going to be chasing the wind if you try to catch on to whatever the fads are. And that's why I've paired brilliance with authentic. And part of authentic brilliance is our story. Exactly kind of what Mark Twain was saying about your why. Looking back and being like, man, what makes me completely unique? The gifts and strengths that I have, the
Yeah.
unique story that I have, the unique expertise that I have, and the unique passion and purpose. The confluence of all of that is what I've referred to as someone's authentic brilliance. And the more aligned you are to that brilliance, the better your odds are of success today.
Wow. Wow. Right. How do we even figure out our story? I know so often I get caught in the day to day and the month to month and the year to year. And right, I just get caught up in what I'm doing. So how do we actually find out what our story is? Because I've tried thinking about this, like, right, how did I get to where I am today? Like, what are the steps I take? And a lot of times I get lost in that. And so what are some ideas and strategies that we can actually use to figure out what our unique gifts are?
Well, so this is a very interesting question, Tim, because although I believe it's what we need to lead with, I actually don't think it's very easy. And that's because we're often really blind to what it is that makes us unique. Like, if you have ever done that, you're like, oh, you're looking back at these artifacts of your life, these things that showed up in your history, and you're like, well, is that what makes me special? Is that what makes me unique? And the truth is, like, well, all of it does. But again, that brings me back to light. If your light is just shining in some very broad way, well, if you enter a room and everyone's shining their light in a broad way, everyone's light is completely indistinguishable.
Hmm.
You can't tell where one begins and one ends. And so that's why if we try to embrace the whole of our life in like in totality and just be like, okay, well, I'm just owning me. Well, it still shows up in this very broad way. So the challenge is we actually need to focus what our message is, what is unique about our story, and find that alignment that exists. So now all of a sudden, our light has color to it, or
Hmm.
it's incredibly niched down and narrowed down, and it's more laser like in its approach. And now it's really, really difficult to ignore. It's really,
Hmm.
really difficult to just be like, oh, Tim, I get it. Like he's the guy that, just shines. And yeah, like it's easy to ignore light that's just diffused, open, and broad. It's a very difficult to
Yeah.
ignore light that's
Hmm.
focused, that's on mission, that's on point. And so while I think it's incredibly important, I don't necessarily think it's that easy. So for example, I bet some of the giftings that you have, because they're gifts of yours, because they're strengths of yours. They're things that might be common sense. Or when you're actually operating in them, it seems like, well, anyone that operates in this can figure out this is the problem, or this is what the solution would be, or this is how you go about something. But they say contrast is the mother of clarity. If you've ever been in a group and all of a sudden they're asking certain questions or there's certain problem solving things, and you're like, isn't this obvious to everyone? And you realize, well, it's actually not. It's
Hmm.
not obvious because you have an ability to, I don't know, maybe um, distinguish root causes of something, but maybe that's difficult for someone else. Someone else has an ability where they're super high on EQ and they can just tell exactly when you should approach someone and maybe when you shouldn't because they're going through a lot. And someone else may not know at all. And they're thinking, well, it's just common sense, Tim. It's not. So I think that's why it's really helpful, either to be with a professional or just people that know you well and kind of bounce off them like, hey, what do you think is unique about me
Hmm.
and, and my strengths or my abilities? Now I understand, Tim, you asked about story. Um, when it comes to story, it's like, what are some of the themes maybe that stand out as you're looking back? And when you look back, I would say one of the things I could say would be helpful is um, where are there moments that have been incredibly painful?
Hmm.
These are things oftentimes people want the parts of their story they'd like to edit out. Oh man, I kind of wish that didn't happen. What I've found is in most of those stories, that's where the gold is of like, well, hey, it didn't kill you. It didn't take you out completely. You're still here and you learned something incredibly valuable. Most of us, the greatest parts that make us unique is from what we've actually suffered. Not
Hmm.
from when life was easy, not from when everything was given to us. So I would say, almost as a guide, use your pain and just go back and look and go, huh, what have I suffered through that now I overcame, and I'm stronger because of that. And what was a mess for me, what was painful for me, can now be something where I can offer guidance to somebody else.
Uh, wow, Shawn, there's so much that you just gave there. And one of the things I'd like you mentioned is you were talking about light. And if we shine our light in a broad way, it's easy to miss. And actually, right, I'm here in the studio. I've got, two big spotlights in front of me, and I can look directly at them, and they're bright, but it's not blinding. But if you were to take these lights and you were to focus them into a beam, I could not ignore that. And so I love that kind of analogy and metaphor that you're using about, right, are we shining our light in a broad way, or are we really focusing it and narrowing our message and narrowing that light? Because as we do that, it becomes more powerful. And like you said, it becomes impossible to miss.
Now, and Tim, I took this from a branding perspective as an expertise of like the best way to brand. And yet you might have heard of, that scripture that says, let your light shine before
Mm,
men so that people can see it and glorify your Father who's in heaven.
yeah.
Like it's incredibly biblical as the Father of lights. And yet we've been made in his image. So each of us have some aspect of light and some unique light that we can then release. And it's almost like our glory to be able to do that. So I start off by giving people permission
Hmm. Wow.
because I think we often are like, oh, we're waiting. Like, can I actually bet on myself? And like, if I do that, is it going to be a good strategy for success? Or do I just need to keep reading all the books, keep going to all the seminars, keep doing everything because I'm fundamentally missing something and I'm fundamentally in lack. And therefore, what my answer, my breakthrough is therefore outside of me. And I'm
Hmm.
like, no, 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 no. I think outside of you, there's mentors, there's teachers, there's counselors, there's books that can elevate, that can enhance. But fundamentally, it starts with having permission to actually be like, hey, who I am, I'm worthy. I have the human dignity and I have value in who I am
Hmm.
right now. And I have permission to almost explore that and be like, yeah, how could I infuse that into my practice, into everything that I do?
Wow. And so, do you think one of the reasons we have such a hard time doing this is because we are really operating with scarcity, and we're not looking inside and realizing that actually we do have the resources, and we're too busy trying to figure out what's outside of us and just saying, "Hey, wait, I'm actually here because I do have the skills, I do have the knowledge, I do have the strategies, but we're almost scared to succeed." Or why do you think we struggle so much with doing this?
Well, so interesting. It's great that you asked that. When I think back to something I shared with Vanessa Emerson and her tribe in January, one of my foundational quotes from the message that I shared was all about Henry David Thoreau. The tragedy of life is what dies within a man or woman while they live. And it's like, well, what does that have to do with this? Um, I believe from an early age, whether that's just circumstances that we've been handed or just maybe parents that didn't necessarily get us, um, we kind of shifted from operating from our hearts to having to operate in more of a mind intellectual type of a way.
Hmm.
And it's like, like I need to guard because I'm afraid of getting hurt. I can't just show who I am in a heart way. And therefore let me come up with all these ways. Like it's interesting. As adults, we are so good at faking it. If you've ever been around a newborn, parents ask me this, they have newborns. They're like, my baby's crying. What do I do? And I'm like, your baby's crying for only three reasons typically. They just need sleep, they need food, or they need love.
Hmm.
And if they don't have enough sleep, they might cry. If they don't have enough nourishment, they're going to cry. And if they don't feel loved, they're going to cry. As adults, we mask everything. We're so good at masking it. We're so good at coming up with coping strategies. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Tim, is like we've been so good at figuring out how to intellectualize and live from a almost like a intellect, mind-centered approach to things that we may not even know what it's like to feel and to integrate our
Hmm.
hearts. And that's why I would say almost all of what I do, first and foremost, is try to figure out how I can restore someone's heart, how I can actually give them permission that like they're beautiful, they're brilliant, they're capable, they're one of a kind, because you don't step out as an original if you don't believe that.
Wow. Wow.
So people ask me about innovation. They're like, well, how do I innovate? How do I do something new? It's like, well, you can't truly release the unique, remarkable, authentic version of yourself when deep down inside you don't believe you can take the spotlight. You don't believe you have something. It's like, well, then you have to figure out what's in. You have to read the trending book and listen to the trending advice and everything. You're trying to catch up and be enough and figure it out. And that's a lot of pressure. And I don't know about you, Tim, but I've been on that rat race before. And day after day, night after night, week after week, I just felt inadequate. And I was like, man, if this is what life's about, I need to tap out because it has to be better than this.
Yeah.
Like who I am has to be enough, or else I don't know if I can do this anymore. So I know I just threw.
No, it's such a powerful message and so needed because I know I struggle with that, right? When I jump on social media and I'm scrolling, right, there's the fear of missing out all the time, and I'm not going to this event and I'm not going to that one because this other one's happening, right? And there's all this fear, and you're watching everyone else and you're wondering, like, do I need to join this group or read that book? And instead of just practicing contentment and realizing, wait, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I can be my authentic self. I don't have to chase other things. And so I think this message is so needed because when we're chasing those things, that leads to stress, anxiety, burnout, panic, depression. It doesn't lead to good results. So where do you think we start going when we start pressing into being our authentic self?
So let me just back up for a second and give a kind of a metaphor or analogy. Then I think I'll be able to answer that. The other day, I was kind of just thinking on some of these things, and I was journaling, and I was like, man, somehow one of the biggest regrets of my life is always tied to the fact that I feel like I'm not making the most of time. Like time's the great equalizer. We all have the same amount of it. And yet there's so many times where I look back on a year, 2 years, 5 years, and I'm like, man, I am not making the best use of time. And I realized that's when I'm under this yoke of perfectionism, performance, being inauthentic. The second you come into this place of deep down, in a real way, I feel like I have some authentic brilliance that I'm going to release into the world. And it's going to manifest in my practice, it's going to manifest in my personal brand. The evidence of that is your relationship with time. You no longer have this frenzied, I'm trying to always catch up. Now, so what came out in this interesting journaling session is I was lamenting that if you want to actually create something of value, an asset, something that's really unique, that's you, that has a fingerprint on it, you can liken it to actually giving birth to a baby. It takes a very long time. I would love to, you'd love to hear about the baby that was born in 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 months. It just doesn't happen. It takes time. But yet, how many of us, because we're just so rushed, when you want something new, like you can go to the pet store right now, Tim, and get a new pet. You can walk home today with a new pet you're gonna be excited about it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh man, it's gonna, release all this dopamine and it's exciting. It's this new thing. You just gave birth to it. It's fascinating. And it's like, you can go to the pet store any day you want and get a new pet, but it takes time to give birth to a baby. I'm just saying, like, if we can liken it, when you're trying to catch up all the time and you're trying to hustle, it's almost like all you can release are things that happen in like a 1 week, 1 month cycle time. And it's almost like these pets that they're not truly your DNA. They're not truly born of you. Doesn't mean they're not great. I love cats. I love dogs. Animals are awesome. But if you want to release something that's truly one of a kind, that's this manifesto, that's this art, and art's a great word for it, that truly is something that only you can do. It's like giving birth to a baby. It takes time. And that only comes when all of a sudden we get those time pressures broken off of us because we realize I'm going to abandon ship 1 month in if I don't actually believe it's going to either go full term or be something worth giving birth to. If once again I go back into FOMO, I go back into who I am is not enough, I need to keep getting more. I need to be something different. But when we end up coming into this place of authenticity, we end up resting into it, and then we can actually create that true art that only we can create.
Wow, powerful, Shawn. And so, right, as a dentist who's in their practice every day, who's working hard on these things, right? How do we find time and space to work on being our authentic selves so that we can birth this authentic and unique practice?
I think, again, it goes back to starting off with just permission.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm taking a step back. I'm doing an audit. Have I been given permission to do dentistry my way? Or am I still trying to do that version 20 years ago or 10 years ago of what I thought a successful dentist had to be? A successful dentist means I have to show up this way. Being a successful dentist means my team has to sound this way, look this way. I would just say, why? Aside from challenging good and amazing clinical outcomes, no one's sacrificing that. If we have amazing clinical outcomes, everything else is up for, I would say, flexibility and discussion of like, is this actually something that's me? Do we have it set up this way? Like, and I mean, I don't think people like freedom in the sense that like the second you remove certain, this is the way things have always been. It's like, well, it would be overwhelming to think you have to reinvent your practice in the next 6 months from the ground up. I think that's ridiculous. I bet 80% of what people are doing is already great. It's best practices. It's amazing. I'm just saying infuse some heart into it.
Hmm. Wow. So, right, I want to pull that a little bit. What does infusing heart actually look like? Like, how do I think differently about that throughout my day?
Um, so I guess it comes partly to how you look at yourself.
Hmm.
Um, like this has been something in my own life, when I'm the founder of a company, when I'm the CEO right off the bat, 8 years ago, I was like, oh man, well, this is the way a CEO has to act. Even the way that I would do team meetings, it was so like, this is best practices. This is what I would
Hmm.
do. And now, 8 years later, I'm like, most of that didn't actually serve me. And most of it was me trying to be something that I wasn't. And the
Hmm.
second I yielded into it, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I don't like team meetings that way. Like we're just not going to do them that way. And I love meeting one-on-one with people. So that's what I do. You're supposed to have assessments and it's supposed to be super rigid and whatnot. That's just not me. And that's not the
Hmm.
way that I operate. So the question is then, well, then what is me? And my employees, it's like they felt even more seen, even more cared for, even more love, which all of a sudden increased performance simply because I was just trying to align myself with who I am
Hmm.
as a strategy for success instead of what I'm supposed to do
Yeah.
because business best practices says do this. Like, I don't know if you've ever done this, Tim, but I used to shut on myself all the time. And now it's like something I believe, like stop shutting on people and don't shut on yourself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like, are you ever in a situation where you're just like, oh, at the end of the day, you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have done all these different things. And instead of feeling empowered, you feel discouraged and heavy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the biggest struggles I faced early on in business. And I know that if you're listening to the show as a driven, high performing entrepreneur, so often we focus on the gap. We focus on everything we didn't get done in the day instead of actually looking at the gain, right? Where did we move forward, right? I can move 1,000 things forward in a day. But at the end of the day, if you ask me like how it went, I'm probably going to tell you the 2 or 3 things I didn't get done instead of the 30 things I did. And so this is a real challenge we face. And I love this heart-centered approach that you're talking about, Shawn, just about being authentic. And actually, a friend of mine, Laura Colette's, comes to mind, Dr. Laura Colette's. And I was just spending a week with her back in Florida. A group of us was there, and we were talking about just, patience in the office and how we do things. And one of the things Laura says is she actually asked her coordinator to give her a couple minutes before going into treatment. Like, so she gives all the patients a couple extra minutes because Laura wants to go in and actually like have a eye to eye, face to face conversation with the patients and connect with them on a human level before jumping into all the treatment. So she actually forces time on the schedule because she believes that connection with the patient is so important that she schedules time for it. And so this is what I think about when you start mentioning having a heart-centered approach and really operating from our unique strengths and the things that make us who we are.
And so I love that because as you're saying that, what I'm seeing is it kind of is bringing it a little bit more home. Um, you can tell. So if the way that a dental professional is showing up with their patients, ongoing, like in a sustainable way, okay, apply that to a relationship that you care about, your son or daughter, or your significant other. Would they be okay if that's the way you showed up?
Hmm.
And if the answer is no, because you're guarded, your walls are up, and all of a sudden it's like you're detached and you're just kind of playing this professional game because I'm the doctor. You don't think your patients can tell something's going on? Like we have such in tune BS meters, and we can tell. Now the thing is, there's a massive difference between a house and a home. A house
Hmm.
you can buy and sell. You can walk into different houses when you're, in the market. And yeah, it's the four walls. It's a house. But the second you move into it and bring heart and soul, it's now a home.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of practices out there that don't have that heart. It's still sterile. It's like robotic, it's mechanized. And there's nothing wrong with great processes. There's nothing wrong with great systems. You need to have those. But my challenge is like bring as much heart as possible so that like patients can actually connect to who you are. We're humans at the end of the day. And the businesses that are succeeding more today are those that are actually able to connect human to human. So I don't know, maybe some of those analogies will be helpful of like, okay, um, so if I'm measuring my practice right now and I'm asking if it's authentic, well, how would I rate my connection with my team? How would I rate my connection with my patients? And the reason why I'm saying connection is because you don't have to be an extrovert. Even if you're introverted, there's still ways that you connect with people. And being authentic means you get to connect with them on your terms. Shining your authentic brilliance means it's just you getting to be you, you having the courage to show up, be seen, and watch the kind of connection you're going to have. And then that becomes the bedrock for your practice. Actual connection with patients, not simply, sterile, mechanized care.
Yeah, right. It's really moving beyond the transaction. It's moving beyond just simple patient care into real connection with people. And this just sounds like a much better way to live. And we've been talking about, just the beauty of being your authentic self, of letting your light shine in your unique way. But I kind of want to bring it back home. And I know for me, it's hard to connect all the dots. And this certainly sounds like a much better way to live. But how do we start tying this into branding and building a standout dental brand? And how do we tie it back into patient loyalty and really making sure our practice is running in the best way possible? So can you kind of help me connect some of these dots, Shawn?
Yeah. So when it comes to our practice, kind of like earlier on, Tim, when you were asking, well, how do I look back and recognize what part of my story kind of matters? What part of my story has significance? If there's this challenge, we all have light, but yet if we just broadly keep shining it, it gets ignored, it's undistinguishable. Well, then how do we end up aligning it? And I would say you have to be incredibly intentional and do the work. And that's where there is some practicality to this. You don't just all of a sudden feel loved. Oh, I'm this flower of brilliance and beauty. And let
Yeah.
me just share it with my practice and share it with the world. Well, you actually have to go through the work and make sure there's alignment with your expertise, alignment with your experience, alignment with your gifts, alignment with your passion and your purpose. And that's some of what I do with clients, but there's a lot of people that can help you. And the reason why you want to do the work is because distilling it down into something clear is like, when it comes to a personal brand, everything is about consistency and clarity of your message. So when all of a sudden you realize, you know what? I got into dentistry because my dad got diagnosed with oral cancer when I was a kid. And I realized had it not been for his dentist, we would have lost dad.
Hmm.
That becomes a signature story that now you're sharing with every single patient so they understand why you're in dentistry. That's an obvious one. But I'm just saying, like,
Well,
you start
well, right, and that story is so much different than, oh, I got into dentistry because I want to help people, right? You actually found a personal, heart-centered connection of actually why this means something to me, because you're tying it back to our personal experiences. So I love that example, Shawn.
And it's like if you have a passion and in your free time you're talking to people about fishing all the time, or you're talking to people about recipes, I'm not saying you need to have fish on the wall and the whole decor and motif of your brand needs to be about fishing. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes it's as simple as that. It's like, oh, I love going to my dentist because he's the guy that makes the best chocolate chip cookies. And whenever he goes to the fairs in our local town, he wins the blue ribbon for the best chocolate chip cookies. And he
Yeah.
just happens to be my dentist. He's a really cool guy. I know my dentist as a person
Hmm.
because they're willing to show up as a person. Now, again, I'm just saying it's about simplifying it, though. It's not just every sort of message, because every single time someone comes in, I'm sharing something different. And that's where, when you do the work, you're going to start realizing a personal brand is about message consistency and message clarity.
Hmm.
It's not the confusing, story that people lose interest with right away. It's actually tightening things up. It's finding the alignment. And that's why I would encourage them to find someone that's a brand specialist to be able to do this work, because when you have focused light, it makes you really, really difficult to ignore.
Yeah. Well, and what are some of the ways that you've been able to incorporate this into your company? Because you make amazing toothbrushes for doctors to offer to their patients, an amazing customized experience. So talk to me a little bit about how you've really incorporated your personal branding into what you're doing at Zana.
Well, so right off the bat, like in the beginning, it's like I'm working with my dad, and he has a dental supply company. And again, if I'm ignoring who I am, it's like, well, then I'm gonna just sell toothbrushes. So when all of a sudden we have this amazing electric toothbrush, the natural thing you do, Tim, when you have an electric toothbrush company, is you sell toothbrushes and you get other people, like a dentist, to sell them. But me wanting to be true to who I am, I'm thinking, well, is there a different way? Can I change the game? Because I don't want to compete against Sonicare and Oral-B on that. Can I change the game so that my practices are the ones that actually look like heroes to their patients? So my practices actually have a way of possibly creating patients for life. So when you take Shawn Zajas, who I am, and you combine that with an electric toothbrush company, it's what you get is Zana, where it's like our whole mission was, how do we elevate the patient experience? So, for people that don't know, if you have a great patient, Tim, my whole belief is this: you don't have data on the patient coming in the practice that's new, that you've never met before, but you have a lot of data on the patients that keep coming back, that know, like, and trust you. So here you are, you're sitting on tons of gold in your practice. It's the patients that keep coming back. And my whole thing is, hey, let them know that you care. Let them know that you appreciate them. Send them a gift without them knowing about it. And they receive this beautiful gift, personalized, it's customized. It's meant to be like this multiplier moment that just kind of makes them for a
Hmm.
moment be like, wow, I belong to a practice. So again, that's kind of me infusing my perspective, some of my gifts of I see things differently. So it's like when I gave myself permission to see things differently in my company, it's like, well, then we can't just sell brushes. We need to
Hmm.
come up with something that actually makes the practice look like heroes. And that's what we're doing. And now we're offering this authentic brilliance program to influencers. So if there's dentists out there that are influencers and they want to find a way that they can be more aligned to their authentic brilliance, I help with that. Or if there's practices that are trying to figure out, well, what's our authentic brand for our practice? That's something else that I help practices figure out.
Oh, amazing. And this is so needed today, Shawn, because I really believe a lot of the world is shallow and it's operating, without any kind of depth. And this allows us to bring a depth of connection and really create connection with people, which is what all of us are in the business of doing, right? Whether you're a dentist or selling toothbrushes or product supplies, right? We are in relationship businesses where we're really serving and helping others. So I love this approach because it gives us permission to be who we are and not fake being someone else.
And Tim, this is exactly what you do. You're showing up here and you have your bow tie. You're showing up with your unique flair, your unique perspective, your unique personality. When you go to a trade show and someone meets you, they're probably not going to see Tim in a suit. They're going to see Tim walking around in the way that you feel comfortable, and it just opens up conversation. It's like, oh my gosh, you love music, you're gifted, you're this, you have this musician kind of background, you have all these interesting things about you that only enhance the way that you're able to connect and help practices.
Yeah.
And you don't hide them, you unapologetically own them. You are one of the most heart-centered people I know,
Mm.
Tim, and that's why it's like whenever we get together, it could just go on and on and on because I love your perspective. You genuinely care about helping the practices you serve more than anything.
Mm. Well, thank you for those kind words. And that's the reason I love a lot of this community is because we do have people like this who are pursuing their authentic selves, and we're not trying to be anyone else other than who we are. Because I make a really bad someone else.
You mean like if we did a reality TV show where
Oh my
Tim
God.
McNealy and Shawn Zajas switched for 30 days?
And it would be a disaster. I would probably get really good ratings because it would be just awful.
And we both bankrupted our companies. Although I have a feeling you would actually do a great job leading my company just because you're so excellent at everything you do, Tim.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Shawn. This has been just an amazing, amazing conversation. It certainly is changing, right? It's helping me go even deeper, thinking about authentic self and thinking about heart-centeredness and how do I bring that to every interaction that I have. And so how do we get in touch with you? How can we find out more about what you're doing at Zana and what you're doing with your Authentic Brilliance program?
So the best way is probably just, I was going to say email, but email Shawn at myzana, SHAWN at MYZANA.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. I have lots of profiles other places, but I'm not super active on them. Or Facebook, you could message me. And yeah, those are probably the two best ways.
Okay, I'm putting the link to my Zana right below. So if you want to click that and connect with Shawn, I'd highly encourage you to do that. Also, check out his show. His podcast is absolutely amazing. And what I love about your show, Shawn, is you do approach it from this heart-centered perspective, and you really dive deep into creating profiles of who's that other human being on the other side of the microphone. So I love your show. I'm a big fan. If you haven't checked out Shawn's show, you got to listen to it. It's absolutely fantastic. And so before we sign off here, Shawn, any closing thoughts or encouragement that you would give doctors who are still kind of struggling with this idea of authenticity? Maybe they're scared, maybe they're a little worried, or just worried about that rejection of what happens if I show up as who I am.
I would just say the most encouraging thing that I think I could say is that it really is true that the best strategy is yourself, because being an original is the one thing no one else can duplicate. It's the moat around your practice. It's the moat around your content. It's the moat around your influence and leadership. And I mean moat as if you're the castle. It's the thing that protects other people from knocking you off. It is the true essence of differentiation. But it takes the work to go, that's not truly unique about me. Let me not highlight that.
Mm.
Maybe that's common to other people. Let me not highlight that. It's this convergence of story, passion, purpose, giftings, strengths. So it's not just your unique superpower. It's how you actually incorporate that into a brand. And I would just say, take the first step.
Hmm.
Take the first step. Give yourself permission. See what dreams bubble up in your heart, and just start following those dreams.
Wow. I'll pull one other thread that I think is so important that you mentioned is we have to do this in community, don't we? We need feedback from other humans to help us. Because I know when I've tried to do this on my own, it's usually pretty hard. But when I do it in community, there's something about having others around that really helps. So can you talk a little bit about that community aspect of really helping us to figure out our authentic selves?
And I think that's so great that you said that, Tim, because part of this is like, oh my gosh, I need to show up, and I need to show up the first time perfect. And I can't let anyone know that I'm in process. And it's like, hey, spoiler alert, we're all in process. Spoiler alert, nobody's figured it out. So just to bring this humility of like, yeah. What I did is was told from some mastermind I was in, hey, just, text 7 or 8 people that know you well. What do you think my unique ability is? Like something that I do maybe uncommonly, better just from an outside perspective. Well, I was like, okay, 7 or 8 people, let's go for it. And I start looking at people. I'm like, oh, I'd like to ask them. Oh, I'd like to ask them. Next thing you know, I sent out 45 texts. And even in that, I was like, wait a second, there's something about me relationally that I felt okay asking 45 different people because I felt like whether they were like coaches from way back in the day, you know, like 20 years older than me, 15 years younger than me, I realized like, wow, I have deep relationships where even if I'm not staying on top of them per se, like when we connect deeply. And I feel like they've seen me. So even that, was kind of eye-opening to me. But the feedback I got was so shocking, and some of the people that I thought were gonna, like, completely peg me that I was really excited for, it was kinda lackluster, and other people that I wasn't really expecting much, and yet
Hmm.
theirs were sometimes the most surprising and profound. So yeah, just in humility, we are a community, and together we're all stronger, and again, sometimes we're blinded to our own uniqueness and our own brilliance because we're so accustomed to it. But one last thing that I would say is that sometimes when you're looking at a unique gift of yours or a unique superpower, it's often the thing you got in trouble for when you were a kid. And
Hmm.
the reason is because you had an aptitude for it, but you lacked maturity.
Wow.
So if you were going to be a great speaker, a great communicator, you probably were talking all the time and told you talk too much, stop it, or be quiet. Or if you were super inquisitive because you were just this problem solver, you probably ask questions all the time. And it's like, oh my gosh, why are you so curious? Like, stay out of it. So we often got in trouble with. So that's just something to leave people with of like, huh, in what ways was I misunderstood? Or in what ways might I have gotten in trouble as a kid because I didn't have the maturity to go with the gift? And that's a good place to start.
You know what? I'm gonna just keep going for a little bit because I love this. And so, are these things that you're gonna cover in the Authentic Brilliance program, and are these things you go through with people? Because I just find that so exciting to be able to ask these questions and work through these with others.
So the coolest thing about the program, the way I set it up, is that it is so heavy with discovery. I go like a day and a half of discovery with the person I'm working with, where it's like, I want to know every single thing about them, their forefathers, their parents, their pain, their struggle. Um, yeah, hopes, dreams, because I'm trying to look at it from every perspective to just really understand like this is going to be your best strategy. Now, coming out of it too, Tim, it's not simply that they discover this is what's unique about me. The biggest takeaway from working with me is I actually give them one core offer
Hmm.
that I believe is going to be their highest leveraged offer. Because going back to how I started this episode, time is the bottleneck that we all come against. So if you're an accomplished dentist, you're 50, 55, but you still feel like there's this kind of transition in your life where you feel like your greatest hour, your greatest season, your greatest moment is still ahead of you. Or if you're anybody, you're an influencer and you have an important message, but you still feel like it can be elevated. Well, the last thing you want to do is spend the next decade squandering time. And all of a sudden looking back 10 years from now and being like, man, I wasn't focused. I wasn't impactful. It wasn't weaponized who I was so that I could be
Mhm.
on point, making the most of who I am in the highest possible way. So that's really the feedback I've gotten is people love that it's this high leveraged offer that's monetizable where it's like work feels like play. So that's kind of a little bit about the Authentic Brilliance program.
Wow, how powerful and how needed today, right? This is an ability to make a dollar and a difference at the same time and really get out there and serve people so well.
Did
So,
you coin that, Tim?
no, I got that from a Dr. Della Toro, who's a
Oh,
Hall of Fame
I like
speaker.
that. That's got a
Dollar and
ring
a
to it.
difference at the same time, right? So good. But man, just thank you for sharing your authentic self with us. Thank you for showing up and thank you for shining a light on how we can do this even better. And so, any closing thoughts before we sign off here, Shawn?
You know, back to the idea of living a little bit more from our hearts, and kind of being more intuitive. I talked to Chuck Blakeman the other day, and he was like, supposedly, Albert Einstein intuited E equals MC squared before he was able to intellectually prove it. And that's one of his greatest contributions to like humanity is this discovery. And yet it wasn't something that he figured out through mental assent. It was something he figured out through that place of heart intuition, of heart knowing. So my challenge just to the listeners is to kind of look at maybe some of the things that shut down people's hearts.
Hmm.
And that's That's like traumas. That's shame. That's unforgiveness. And I know this doesn't sound very professional, but it actually stops us from being able to show up and be present and really own that power that we have. Shame, literally, Tim, the definition is wrongness of being. How are you going to be? How are you going to own your light and shine when deep down inside you have this shame that's saying, no, there's something wrong about you? So
Wow.
I also love doing the deep heart work with people, and that's what I would encourage them to do. I would say you're beautiful, you're brilliant, and it's okay for you to just be. But please go to war against everything that tries to get your heart to shut off or to get watered down. Be bold and just shine that unique light.
Amazing. If I had a mic, I would drop it right now. So Shawn, absolutely amazing. Thank you for just your gift and for your brilliance. And thank you for all our listeners for tuning in again. And we'll see you here real soon on the Dental Wealth Nation show. Thanks again, Shawn.
You've been listening to Dental Wealth Nation. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Join us next time as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families, and help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love. Till next time, make sure to hit the website at dentalwealthnation.com.